Being a Nintendo fan right now is great. These past few months of waiting for the Nintendo Switch 2 and anticipation while getting news of other things that I don't care about has been great. I mean, it makes me think back to... Nintendo's going to have some kind of new hardware announcement?
This is Nintendo Sound Clock Alarmo.
A Nintendo alarm clock? An NSO playtest? I wonder what that's about. Let me try to get in on this thing. Oh, it's already filled up. Already leaks of that NSO playtest. That's not a game I'd play anyway. It's great for other people though. I'm happy for them. Oh, what's this? Another game's announced? Xenoblade Chronicles X. At least now, there's no more Xenoblade Chronicles that Nintendo has to waste releases on. You know what I could use right now? A Nintendo Switch mobile phone app that has all the soundtracks to my favorite Nintendo games.
Listen to music from some of your favorite Nintendo games. Introducing Nintendo Music. Nintendo Music features a variety of tracks from franchises such as Animal Crossing, The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario, and many more.
It's perfect. You're tuning in to Nintendo's Greats. Nintendo Music. I was ecstatic when I first saw this trailer. Then, I opened the app. Surprisingly enough, I was quite happy with the amount of soundtracks available, and the variety, it wasn't that bad. The main issue was, there was 9 Nintendo Switch soundtracks. Actually, 10, because Splatoon 2 was recently added. Thanks. It's still 6 more than all the other ones. But really, I can't complain. And Nintendo said they'd bring over some soundtracks, and although at first I thought they'd take months and months to release even one, they've been doing it weekly. According to my calculations, there have been 6 albums added to Nintendo Music since its launch. Those include the following. First, of course, the day after the app released was Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Then, within a week, we got Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest. Then Wii Sports the following week. Then F-Zero X. Then, next was Brain Age, also known as Dr. Kawashima's Brain Training How Old Is Your Brain in the PAL regions. And then, this last week, we got Splatoon 2. Thanks again. Of the games shown in the original trailer that Nintendo said were coming soon to Nintendo Music, there are 3 remaining. Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, and The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. But if there's only these 3 games left, and Nintendo doesn't know what to put on Nintendo Music, then I thought I'd help them out a little. So I decided to pick the next soundtracks that should come to Nintendo Music. But some people might say, Nintendo Music, that's stupid. Why did they not put it on Spotify? Everyone has Spotify. To that, I say, not everyone has Spotify. I'm more of an Apple Music guy myself. Personally, I use YouTube Music. Well, my point still stands. With all these streaming services, I think it'd be stupid for Nintendo to license out their songs to every single one. If not, it'd just be unfair, and all the people with Apple Music and YouTube Music would be complaining that all these great Nintendo songs aren't coming to their platform because Nintendo only wanted to license it out to one. And also, this acts as another benefit for the Nintendo Switch Online members. For the base model. Please Nintendo, something to make the $50 purchase worth it. Well, let's just go on to the soundtracks that I want Nintendo Music to add. For this, I decided to choose the least amount of Zelda and Mario soundtracks, as possibly possible for me. But you know, it's really hard because those really are the best soundtracks on every console. I mean, they're usually the most iconic too. So, can you really blame me? Personally, I'm not really much of a Kirby guy, or Kid Icarus guy, or Metroid guy, but I mean like, I'll count some of them just because I know there's you fans out there. First system up is the NES, the system that started it all. Unless you count the systems before it, which don't really have iconic soundtracks and probably will not make it on the Nintendo Music system, but that would be pretty cool. So for this, I decided to pick 4 soundtracks that I think would be most likely, and then I'm going to take those 4 and narrow it down to 2. First, here are some honorable mentions for the NES soundtracks. Number 1 is The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda has very identifiable songs, such as the main theme and the title theme, which are basically the same, and the dungeon theme, which is really annoying. There's also the final dungeon theme, which is also annoying. Since it only has like 4 songs, and they're all kind of annoying, I did not include it. Another honorable mention, Super Mario Bros. 2. Very iconic, it'll eventually come to Nintendo Music, but I don't want to put 2 Mario games on the making it list. Ice Climbers, also up there. Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong 3, you know it. Iconic Donkey Kong 3 soundtrack. But none of those made it. Now let me tell you the ones that did make it. Super Mario Bros. 3. The 3rd installment to the Super Mario Bros. Universe, and personally, the best soundtrack of all the NES Super Mario Bros. Not most iconic, that would probably go to the first one, but I think it has a very expansive library of songs, and I think it really deserves to be on Nintendo Music, or the NES section. The next contester is Mother/Earthbound Beginnings. This is probably, in my opinion, the best 8-bit soundtrack on all systems ever. I know that's kind of a big claim, but it's true. The next one is Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Actually, that game isn't called Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Anymore. It's subsequently been known as, in all further releases since the original Mike Tyson release, as Punch-Out! Featuring Mr. Dream. All mentionings of Mike Tyson in the game have been replaced by Mr. Dream, who is virtually the same fighter as Mike Tyson in the aforementioned Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Well, I'm just talking about the soundtrack, which is the same, so, I mean... Punch-Out! Is pretty iconic. It only has a couple songs, but that means it'd be easy to put on Nintendo Music, and all the songs are good, not like the Legend of Zelda soundtrack, which has some stinkers. The next is the most iconic motorcycle game on the NES, Excite Bike. That one is not going to make it into the final 2, but it's pretty good. I think the final 2 goes to Super Mario Bros. 3 and Mother/Earthbound Beginnings. Next up, the Game Boy. The Game Boy is green. So first, some of the honorable mentions for the Game Boy. Pokemon Red and Blue. Very, very iconic soundtrack, but personally, I don't think Nintendo would include Pokemon Red and Blue first over the 2 games that I chose. Super Mario Land 2. Overall, Super Mario Land 2 was a pretty big improvement over the original Super Mario Land, with its mechanics of moving and stuff, but personally, I like the first better. Super Mario Land 2 is good, and its soundtrack is as well. It uses a similar leitmotif throughout the game that changes depending on where you are in the game, and it was also the first game to feature Wario. But when I think of the soundtrack, there's not really ones that stick out particularly. It's mainly just the Super Mario Land 2 theme, which I think makes this not as iconic of a soundtrack as some other options for the Game Boy library. Kirby's Dream Land 2 is a pretty good Game Boy soundtrack in the vein of the first soundtrack, which is already on Nintendo Music. It does seem likely that, down the line, this will be one of the Kirby games added to Nintendo Music, but I think right now it shares too many similarities with the first one, having some repeated songs, so I don't think it's likely that we'll see this coming to Nintendo Music anytime soon. But, I mean, if it came, I wouldn't be as mad as if some other games came. Next up, Donkey Kong on the Game Boy. This game is much more than just a simple port of the arcade game or NES game. It features a much bigger game, with many more songs available, some of which are actually pretty good. But because of this game's relative obscurity, I don't see it coming in the foreseeable future to Nintendo Music. Next up, Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, the sequel to Super Mario Land 2. This game has some iconic Wario themes. I personally really like the main theme, but in comparison to some other games, I think this one isn't too likely to make it. But at least one Wario Land game is going to make it eventually to this Nintendo Music thing, but I don't know if it's going to be the first one, because they didn't even release it on Nintendo Switch Online yet, and I feel like this Nintendo Music thing is kind of an advertisement for Nintendo Switch Online, even though you need Nintendo Switch Online to have Nintendo Music. Like, the Nintendo Switch section is definitely advertising for the games that are out there. They want you to get the music, and then if you like the music, you'll buy the game. So, the top 2 Game Boy soundtracks, and I only included 2 because I'm going to have these up against the Game Boy Color soundtracks, because some people count them as the same. I don't, but I'm gonna respect your guys' opinions. Actually, the Game Boy Color is technically in the same line as the original Game Boy, as it features many similarities to the expanded upon DSi in comparison to the DS, or the Game Boy Advance SP in comparison to the Game Boy Advance, or, likewise, the new Nintendo 3DS in comparison to the Nintendo 3DS. It is not to be counted as a significant leap, such as that of the Wii to the Wii U. Final 2 are Super Mario Land and The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I know I said I wouldn't include Zelda and Mario in all of them, but most of them are like that anyway because, I mean, they're the best soundtracks. Pitch against those two, I'll bring up some of the Game Boy Color soundtracks. First up is The Legend of Zelda Oracle games. Did not make the cut because it's basically Link's Awakening. Again, some very repetitive, annoying songs. I know this because I've played a quarter of the game. Next up is Pokemon Card Game Boy 2. Apparently it has good music, but I've never played it because it's only in Japan, so it doesn't make the cut. Next is Pokemon Gold and Silver, which really should make the cut because it's a really good soundtrack and probably the best Game Boy soundtrack. But I don't think it will because Nintendo's gonna be stingy on those Pokemon soundtracks. The 2 that did make it though, Wario Land 2 or 3, I don't know which one because even though I played a little bit of them during the storm, they are both great games, but I think Wario Land 3's soundtrack slightly edges out Wario Land 2's just because it's on Nintendo Switch Online, and it is a better game too. Then Pokemon Trading Card Game, the game, apparently it has a good soundtrack. The 2 that win out of Game Boy Color and Game Boy, Pokemon Trading Card the game, because they're gonna put that soundtrack on, even though people would want Gold and Silver. Apparently it's still pretty good. And The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. That one, I just like it. Next, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. We got some good soundtracks that didn't make it, such as Super Mario RPG, which stands for Super Mario Role-Playing Game. Next is Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. I only included this one because 1 is already on the streaming service, 2's come to it, so 3 makes sense, but it didn't make the cut because I think Donkey Kong Country fans would be mad if they put the 3rd soundtrack on there and not the better ones. Next is F-Zero. F-Zero has a really good soundtrack, but they're already putting F-Zero X in Nintendo Music, so I didn't include this F-Zero because we don't want F-Zero to pollute the economy. Next is Kirby Superstar. It has the most iconic Kirby song that I know off the top of my head, which would be the Gourmet Race. It's not gourmet, it's gourmet, because it's Kirby. Next is Star Fox. Star Fox has some iconic songs, like the Star Fox song, and I liked the first level of the game. I died on the second one, and haven't played it again. Next is Super Mario Kart. It has the iconic theme of the Mario Kart intro, and the Mario Kart Mario Circuit song. And it's on the Super Nintendo, but it didn't make the cut. Next is Super Metroid. This game is generally regarded as one of the best Super Nintendo games, and I think it is pretty likely to come to Nintendo Music soon. But personally, I'm not really the biggest Metroid guy. It's not what it looks like. And there's already 2 Metroid soundtracks on Nintendo Music, and it has some very subdued songs that, I don't know, not really my style. And of the Super Nintendo soundtracks, I think there are a few that are just a little bit better than this Super Metroid. But I would still really like to see more Metroid games come to Nintendo Music
in the future.
2 soundtracks, that's enough for the Metroid fans. Right, Metroid fans? I mean, you even have the Famicom Disk System version of the original Metroid. Whoopee! Of the Super Nintendo soundtracks, 4 that I really thought stuck out are Earthbound, which it's already on Apple Music through iTunes if you want to buy it there, so you could do that, but it's not the whole soundtrack. And it's free if you already have a Nintendo Switch Online membership if they put it on through this way. And I think it's such an iconic soundtrack that it has to be on there, even if they already have the mother soundtrack. You forgot something important in this whole debacle, whether Earthbound will make it into Nintendo Music. There are many legal issues regarding Earthbound's re-release in Nintendo Music because it features many copyrighted aspects of songs that are reproduced in this game as samples. Here are some examples of those samples. Well, I want Earthbound on Nintendo Music anyway. Next is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This one, it's one of the most iconic 2D Zelda games, probably the most iconic 2D Zelda game. And the soundtrack is pretty good with hits like the Dark World theme, the Overworld theme, and the Kakariko Valley theme, and the Forest theme, and the Death Mountain theme, the Castle theme, and the Zelda Lullaby theme, which originated in this game, not Ocarina of Time, where it's used much more prominently. But I think this one really should make the cut. Let's see what it's up against. Super Mario World, very iconic, and Pilot Wings, very good soundtrack. Well, now we have to narrow these 4 down to just 2. So, which ones make it? Super Mario World and Pilot Wings make it. Yes, Nintendo upsetted all the Earthbound fans because they have the Mother soundtrack, but not the more iconic game Earthbound soundtrack, which is probably a better soundtrack. But Mother's still a good soundtrack. And even though I really like A Link to the Past and Earthbound, it's kind of a crime that Nintendo hasn't announced that Super Mario World is going to come in a future update. Many fans cite it as the best Mario game of all the Mario games. That's kind of crazy, but I can see where they're coming from. I really like the game, and I think its soundtrack is among the most iconic, with the most Mario games reusing the themes from this one, and the first level's theme being a masterpiece in itself. Pilot Wings, on the other hand, is something that Nintendo Music hasn't really represented yet, and it's a series which I personally really like and kind of stumbled upon on accident. I think the Light Plane theme is really iconic in its own sense. If any Pilot Wings game is to release on Nintendo Music, I think it is the original, even though the gameplay in Pilot Wings 64 and Resort on 3DS are arguably better. The Nintendo 64, they've got hits that didn't make it, such as Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Honestly, this one should have made it, but I'm including too many Zelda games in the top 4, so it didn't make it. Paper Mario soundtrack is really good. It has the beginning of many iconic Paper Mario styled songs. Though I haven't beat Paper Mario, the original on the Nintendo 64, I do plan on it, and I do think I will enjoy the soundtrack. But for now, I'm not going to include this Paper Mario. Mario Kart 64, very iconic soundtrack, but the problem is with Mario Kart games, I think with Mario Kart 8 already including a lot of different songs, I think Mario Kart 64 would be less likely to make it, though I really do think eventually it will make it. But for now, I'll disregard that one. Next, we have Super Smash Bros. I do really want a Super Smash Bros. Soundtrack on. Ultimate seems unlikely because it's just got way too many songs. Super Smash Bros. The original is not quite the most iconic Smash Bros. Game. It does have some good songs, but since it's not the most iconic, it does not make this list. Next is Wave Race 64. It's a good soundtrack, but not good enough. Next, Diddy Kong Racing. It's a good soundtrack. There is already a very similar themed game that Rare released on the 64, which is the first of the top 4, Donkey Kong 64, though there's a bunch of licensing issues. Oh, I would love to talk about Microsoft's acquisition of Rare. You see, in the GameCube, Game Boy Advance era of video games that Nintendo faced, Microsoft bought Rare. This was right as Microsoft was entering the video game market with their console, the Xbox. This put a stop to many of the projects that Rare were gonna do under this new era with Nintendo, such as Diddy Kong's Pilot, which eventually became Banjo Pilot on the Game Boy Advance. Because of this, it has been hard for Nintendo to re-release several Nintendo 64 games, such as Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, GoldenEye 007, Donkey Kong 64, and Diddy Kong Racing. Fortunately, the first 3 of those have all been released on Nintendo's online service for the Nintendo 64. It is likely that we will see the others coming in a future date, and Nintendo could make another deal with Microsoft to release some of the Donkey Kong 64 soundtracks or the Diddy Kong Racing soundtracks. But this legal battle might provide just enough for Nintendo not to re-release these songs. Well, I think Donkey Kong 64 is more likely than Diddy Kong Racing to make it, and it has a pretty banging soundtrack, especially the DK rap, which is the only reason I want it on here, because we already have a couple Donkey Kong soundtracks, and I feel like this one is not the biggest one that people are asking for, but another way to listen to the DK rap, that sounds great. Then Yoshi's Story. I think we need another Yoshi game on this Nintendo Music streaming service. I understand that Yoshi's Island, already on the service, really good soundtrack, but I think Yoshi's Story will throw some contrasting songs onto that service. Then Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards. I really like this soundtrack. I think it should make it. The fourth and final contestant for the Nintendo 64 soundtracks is... I've not decided yet. Give me a sec. I can't find another soundtrack. Despite legal issues with Rare, Banjo-Kazooie is one of the greatest soundtracks on the Nintendo Switch, and he stars in Diddy Kong Racing, meaning that Banjo is a Donkey Kong character. Conker's also in there, so that makes things interesting. In the end, the two that I think stand out as Nintendo Music worthy soundtracks are Yoshi's Story and Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards. I think those would be likely candidates, even though I'd prefer Donkey Kong 64 and Majora's Mask. Beggars can't be choosers. Here's the honorable mentions for the Game Boy Advance. Wario Land 4, another Wario Land game. This one, I know it has an iconic soundtrack. Next, The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. That soundtrack, a lot of misses, but probably the best 2D Zelda game. I think personally better than A Link to the Past in some ways. Some ways A Link to the Past is definitely better, but we all have opinions. Next, Mario Kart Super Circuit. Next, Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green. The same thing that applied to Red and Blue applies here. It just didn't make it because I didn't feel like having it make it. But one Pokemon game did make it. Pokemon Ruby/Sapphire/Emerald deserves to be on Nintendo Music. I'm not saying that because I played a Hoenn region game as my first game. I'm saying it because it is the best soundtrack for any Pokemon game ever, and is the best by far. With that, the other Game Boy Advance soundtrack that I believe should make it to Nintendo Music, the one and only Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. The Mario and Luigi series has an iconic sound that no other series really replicates, and Superstar Saga is the best example of this, and the purest example as it is the first in the series. I think it'd be a crime to not see a Mario and Luigi soundtrack come, and I think if not Bowser's Inside Story, which might be up there as one of the most iconic. I think this one should come. Well, next up is WarioWare Inc. Mega Micro Games. I love myself a WarioWare soundtrack. Last, but most definitely not least, is, you guessed it, Mother 3. Yeah, I know I included all 3 Mother games in this Nintendo Music list thing, but Mother 3 stands out on its own, as each Mother soundtrack really adds something different, and I think what Mother 3 adds is something great that really should come to Nintendo Music. But obviously first they have to release it internationally. The 2 soundtracks that I believe could and should come to Nintendo Music are Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire and Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. The Nintendo GameCube. It existed. The first honorable mention for the Nintendo GameCube is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. This game has an amazing soundtrack. I think it is a fan favorite among a lot of Zelda fans, especially the ones who don't like Wind Waker. And with Wind Waker coming to Nintendo Music, Twilight Princess would probably be good to balance out the fans. I mean, Skyward Sword is coming, but I think that's more of an in-between of the two. And with a lot of people being kind of divisive on Skyward Sword, I don't know if that was the best choice, except for the purpose of bringing more diversity to the systems that are represented on Nintendo Music. But in the end, I didn't add Twilight Princess to the top 4 GameCube soundtracks because I can't add another Zelda game. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Now, I know this one is fan favorite, and it was recently re-released in HD on Nintendo Switch, but I think this game is sort of unlikely to make it because I haven't really played it. Another one that didn't make it that I almost forgot about, Luigi's Mansion. I don't think it fits the vibe of Nintendo Music. The ones that did make it, Pikmin 1, Pikmin 2, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Super Mario Sunshine. I personally think all 4 of these must make it. I will not pick one. On one hand, you have Pikmin 1 and 2 both making it. These games have some of the most iconic soundtracks on the GameCube, and with them being re-released both on the Wii and the Switch, I think it is kind of likely for them to eventually come to Nintendo Music. But right now, for the Pikmin series, all we have representing it is Pikmin 4, which overall is a pretty lackluster soundtrack. So if Pikmin 1 and 2 came to Nintendo Music with their iconic soundtracks, that would be a dream. But if you don't have Super Smash Bros. Melee and Super Mario Sunshine soundtracks, it's like, really? Because you have Super Mario Galaxy soundtrack, you have the Super Mario 64 soundtrack on its way, and if you don't have Sunshine, it's like you just have a big gap in between. And we already have the Super Mario Sunshine soundtrack through 3D All-Stars and its music playing thing. So I think it's realistic that we will eventually get Super Mario Sunshine. And Super Smash Bros. Melee, I think, is the most iconic Smash Bros. And if any Smash Bros. Should be on this service, it should be Super Smash Bros. Melee. And we really need another GameCube game on this service because right now we only have one, with one on the way. And the one that is there is Metroid Prime, which is kind of just ambient noise and a couple songs. So I mean, put some of that GameCube charm onto the system, preferably all 4 of these soundtracks, because Pikmin 1 and 2 have better soundtracks than 4, and that's the only one we have. Next is the Nintendo DS, very iconic handheld system that I think most people these days are starting to feel nostalgic for. So I think Nintendo should really focus in on this group of people. Me personally, I'm more of a 3DS guy. The ones that didn't make it, both Zelda games, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I don't think they're the most iconic Zelda games. I think they should make it, but to limit my Zelda count, they didn't. Also, New Super Mario Bros. Very good Mario game. Doesn't make the cut because we need some non-Mario action. The top 4 DS games ended up being Mario Kart DS. We do need at least one more Mario Kart soundtrack, and I think Mario Kart DS is a very likely suspect because I think a lot of people growing up now are all big Mario Kart DS fans. That's strange, but I mean, you can be a Mario Kart DS fan, I guess. I think, though, it might be kind of unlikely to assume a Mario Kart game coming soon to Nintendo Music because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is insane. More likely to come to Nintendo Music is WarioWare Touched. I think I said we need a WarioWare soundtrack on this service. I think WarioWare Touched is the perfect candidate because WarioWare has an iconic sound to it that I don't think is replicated by many other games. I think this one has some very standout songs. It is the origin to Ashley's theme, which is probably up there as one of the most popular WarioWare songs. And I think just that alone makes it likely to come to Nintendo Music. Next, the game that's probably going to be remade next by Nintendo for, I'm assuming, the Nintendo Switch successor, but we'll see if it's made for the Alarmo first. Pokemon Black and White. I think these games have a very iconic soundtrack, especially now, looking back when it was made a long time ago, like 2010. Looking at Nintendo Music, I kind of saw a pattern with the two Nintendo DS soundtracks, and it was casual games. So I thought, what is the most iconic casual game soundtrack? Immediately, I thought to the big floating head itself, Dr. Kawashima, his Brain Age, How to Train Your Brain in Minutes a Day. Personally, I do not want this one to make it through. As of November 25th, it seems Brain Age has been added to Nintendo Music. I think you should be more up to date on your stuff that you say, Ethan. Well, for the sake of me not searching through every other casual game, I'll just say Brain Age 2. I don't want this one to make it either, but you know what? We'll probably see this before the two that I actually do want to come. So the top two for the Nintendo DS are Pokemon Black and White and WarioWare Touched. Personally, I really didn't grow up with Pokemon Black and White, but I know a lot of people do really like Pokemon Black and White, and I think that a lot of people would be happy to see it on Nintendo Music sooner than later, especially before the Pokemon Black and White remakes come out, whenever that is, since we're getting Pokemon X and Y, sort of reimagined game before that, which I'm more excited for because I like X and Y better. For the Wii, I originally put this together all by myself before going back and seeing what some other people thought were the best Wii soundtracks.
We want Xenoblade, we want Xenoblade, we want Xenoblade, we want Xenoblade.
And then I considered it and decided I'd rather Nintendo put on the soundtracks that I want to be on Nintendo Music. I did not go off what other people might think are their favorites, like our honorable mentions here, which are probably all fan favorites, like the Xenoblade Chronicles soundtrack.
We want Xenoblade.
Apparently, as I saw, was very good, but I've never played Xenoblade Chronicles, and I don't plan on it. Next, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I think they should put Melee in, so if they put Melee in, Brawl's not coming anytime soon. Though, I do really like the intro to Super Smash Bros. Brawl and the Latin chorus. It doesn't make any sense in English. Next is Mario Kart Wii. I think if any Mario Kart game makes it, it'll probably be Mario Kart DS because that one is the most modern while still being a lot different than Mario Kart 8. Personally, I would prefer the Mario Kart Wii soundtrack or even Mario Kart 7. Not a very popular opinion. This one I really wish made it into the top 4, but there was just 4 better ones. It was Donkey Kong Country Returns. I think this is a superb soundtrack, and with its remake coming out this January, I think it might be more likely than the 4 that I picked, but there are 4 that are better, in my opinion. The first one, Super Mario Galaxy 2. The soundtrack is better than the first one. If the first one's in, this one has to be in. You already know this is going in the top 2. You don't even have to think about this one. Next, New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I think this is the best New Super Mario Bros. Soundtrack. Even though there probably are better ones, I still think this is the most iconic. And the most people played this one because you can have 4 people play at the same time, and think about it. 4 is more than 1/2, which no one played the 2-player New Super Mario Bros. For DS. I think this one's more likely. Next, Wario Land Shake It. This game's soundtrack is beautiful. Next, Wii Sports Resort. I know Nintendo has Wii Sports and the Wii menu, so I think those are really 2 iconic Wii representatives of the basic feel of the Wii, but Wii Sports Resort sort of takes those and goes to the next level, throwing on a resort theme to the songs, and I think if this doesn't make it, then we'll never see a Wii Play or Wii Music or Wii Party soundtrack coming, so I think we need to start it off, continue the Wii series, on Nintendo Music. There's two of these that stand out as the cream of the crop, and it is Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Wario Land Shake It. I think with Wii Sports already coming, it might be better if we got new Super Mario Bros. Wii and Wii Sports Resort down the line, as these both kind of feed off the same multiplayer energy as Wii Sports Resort did, while Wario Land Shake It and Super Mario Galaxy 2 are more of one-player epics. Next, the most iconic three-dimensional Nintendo system, the Virtual Boy. I love the Virtual Boy. I'm just gonna skip right into the top 4 because there's not that many games on the Virtual Boy. We got Virtual Boy Wario Land, then we got Nestor's Funky Bowling, then we got Teleroboxers, and the best game in the Persona series, Jack Bros. Now you may be wondering, which two made it? Which two are gonna make the Nintendo Music Virtual Boy library? Here it is. Teleroboxers and Nestor's Funky Bowling. You see, we really don't have enough Nestor in current Nintendo. Ever since Nintendo Power closed down, when have you seen Nestor? You probably don't even know who Nestor is. I know I don't. Nestor? From Nestor's Funky Bowling? Teleroboxers? If we don't have the Punch-Out soundtrack, we need a Teleroboxer soundtrack. I would say Jack Bros would make it, but no, Shimigami Tensei, whatever it's called, company might have some issues with their less than stellar's Jack Bros Red and Black game coming to Nintendo Music. I don't think we're getting Virtual Boy Nintendo Music. What is somewhat likely though is Nintendo 3DS. Currently on Nintendo Music, just like for Virtual Boy, there are 0 Nintendo 3DS soundtracks. And while for Virtual Boy, I think we're gonna stay at 0 soundtracks. I think that we're gonna see a 3DS soundtrack eventually. One of my personal favorite 3DS games and my first 3DS or DS game I ever played, Super Mario 3D Land. I didn't include this one in the top 4. I think I picked a lot of Mario songs. And I said I wouldn't pick all Mario games and Zelda games, so we can automatically discount New Super Mario Bros. 2, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, and The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. All of these I really want on there, and I think eventually most of them might come. Triforce Heroes, that's up for debate. It's a really good soundtrack, but I don't think anyone's gonna be super happy seeing Triforce Heroes make it. A Link Between Worlds, that might be too similar to A Link to the Past. New Super Mario Bros. 2, that might not be coming, but 3D Land, it's definitely coming. A couple other notable Nintendo releases that I still think should come for the Nintendo 3DS include Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, Tomodachi Life, and Pokemon Sun and Moon. I'll just give a second to explain the pros and cons of each one of these coming to Nintendo Music. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. The pros would be Nintendo just re-released it on Nintendo Switch as Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, so releasing the soundtrack would be good to bring more attention to the game, to sell more copies. Possible cons would be that there are 2 more iconic games in the series that they could release the soundtracks for before Luigi's Mansion 2. The pro for Tomodachi Life is that this is one of the most popular games on the Nintendo 3DS. The con, they already have Tomodachi Collection on Nintendo Music, Pokemon Sun and Moon. These games arguably have 2 of the greatest soundtracks in the Pokemon series, and I think they eventually will come to Nintendo Music. Really, I don't have any cons for these ones. It's just, there are 4 better games. The 4, though, that I did pick ended up being Paper Mario Sticker Star. This is not a Mario game, it's a Paper Mario game. Deal with it. Now, I know this isn't the most popular Paper Mario game, and I did already list Paper Mario and Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door as both not making it. You may say, those are more popular, they should have made it. But I think, if any game should make it, it should be Paper Mario Sticker Star, because I like it. And it has a really good soundtrack. swear, you don't have to play it because you probably won't like it. The 3DS menu. The Wii channels all made it. I think the 3DS menus are next in line to make it to the Nintendo Music software. Miitopia. It has a really good soundtrack, and I think we don't have enough Mii games on there. We have the Mii channel from the Wii, and I guess if we had the 3DS menus, we'll have that Mii channel. And Wii Sports has come, but Miitopia is kind of a different beast in itself. Also, we had Tomodachi Collection, so Miitopia is kind of like a sequel or a spin-off or something. Pokemon X and Y. I really want these ones to be on. The two that I think it comes down to being my choices for Nintendo Music are Paper Mario Sticker Star and the 3DS menu for the Wii U. There really wasn't that much to pick from because, let's face it, there's not really that many iconic Wii U games. Most of them came to Switch, and most of the ones on this list are on Switch. I really want Pikmin 3 in Nintendo Music.
With its re-release, Pikmin 3 Deluxe on Switch, I think it would be kinda likely to see it one day on Nintendo Music. But before I already listed Pikmin 1 and 2, so I don't want to list all 3 Pikmin games, especially since we already have Pikmin 4. We don't talk about that one. Xenoblade Chronicles X. This one actually has a bad soundtrack. Now the first for the top 4.
Super Mario 3D World, and they'll also include Bowser's Fury. I'm only including this as a Wii U game because it came out on Wii U first. It's better on Switch, but we need some Wii U representation up in this house. Next is the Wii U menus. I said the 3DS menus, and they have the Wii channels, so why not the Wii U menus?
Next, Yoshi's Woolly World. I think of all the Yoshi games, this one might have one of the best soundtracks. Yoshi's Story already made it as one of my top 2 of the top 4, but I think this one still holds a chance because it is such a great soundtrack, and it's a whole lot better than Yoshi's Crappy World on Nintendo Switch.
Then finally, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. This one, I think will make it. And after Donkey Kong Country 2, I think this will be the next in line for the Donkey Kong Country series to make it to Nintendo Music and Super Mario 3D World. Well, that's everything that I want to come to Nintendo Music. You know, you forgot something. The Nintendo Switch soundtrack's coming to Nintendo Music. Knowing Nintendo, and as you said before, this is an advertising scheme for them, they will likely release many more Nintendo Switch soundtracks over older releases. Personally, I don't think we need any more soundtracks. We already have 10. I think we should fill out the other libraries of games. But
I guess I have to do it anyway. The honorable mentions for the Nintendo Switch are Cadence of Hyrule, Yoshi's Crafted World, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Nintendo Switch Sports, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. None of those made it. Next, the top 4 for the Nintendo Switch.
I would pick ARMS, Pokemon Sword and Shield,
Xenoblade Chronicles 2,
and The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Again, because I already picked it for Game Boy, but the 2019 soundtrack, it's completely different. It's all the same songs, but they just sound that much better.
I included the Xenoblade one because I couldn't think of anything else.
If I had to limit it down to 2, I would cut The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening because, I mean, if we have the Game Boy one, we can wait a year. Honestly, Nintendo would be more likely to include this than the original Game Boy one.
And not Xenoblade. But for the 2 that did make it,
We already have Scarlet and Violet. I think Pokemon Sword and Shield is a better soundtrack. Even though I haven't really listened to the Scarlet and Violet soundtrack all the way through. And ARMS? It's ARMS. The gameplay may be repetitive, but... But it's ARMS. It's a great soundtrack.
now that that's done, let's take a real quick look back at every single game I listed that should come to Nintendo Music. ARMS, Pokemon Sword and Shield, Super Mario World plus Bowser's Fury, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, the 3DS menus, Paper Mario Sticker Star, Nestor's Funky Bowling, Teleroboxers, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Wario Land Shake It, Pokemon Black and White, WarioWare Touched, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Pikmin 2, Pikmin, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards, Yoshi's Story, Pokemon Trading Card the Game, The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, Pilot Wings, Super Mario World, Mother/Earthbound Beginnings, and Super Mario Bros. 2. Well, now I'm free until Nintendo responds to my email. Wait, what's that?
Huh. It looks like Nintendo announced something new coming to Nintendo Music. Oh, for the Nintendo 64? It must be Super Mario 64. I mean, that's the only Nintendo 64 game of the ones that it said were coming. Wave Race 64?